Welcome, everyone, to The Real Spill, where we dive deep into the stories that resonate with the human experience. I'm Ro, your storyteller and guide on this journey through life's most intense moments. Whether you're tuning in from the comfort of your own home or listening on the go, I'm thrilled to have you here. Today, we're embarking on a harrowing tale of survival, resilience, and relentless pursuit of freedom. In this story, Across the Border, you'll meet Emily, a woman whose life takes a terrifying turn when she is abducted and thrust into the world of darkness. But Emily is not just a victim, she's a fighter, and her journey will take you on the edge of your seat. As we dive into parts of Emily's story, I invite you to imagine the tension, the fear, the determination that pulses through every moment. And don't forget, this is an interactive story, so your input is detrimental to the ending of the story. So be sure to put your thoughts in the comments. Sit back, relax, and let's begin The Real Spill. This is Across the Border. Pearly B Publishing presents Across the Border, written by Roceathia Cornell, read by Roceathia Cornell. Emily Mason had always prided herself in being careful. From an early age, she had been taught the importance of vigilance and precaution. Whether it was locking her doors, avoiding risky situations, or simply being aware of her surroundings. She was the kind of woman who meticulously planned her life, from her career as a project manager at a tech firm to her personal life, where spontaneity was a rare and calculated indulgence. That Friday night was one of those rare occasions. Emily had just been promoted, a position she had worked tirelessly to achieve over the past 5 years. It wasn't just a step up in her career, it was a validation of her hard work, intelligence, and dedication. Her friends had insisted on taking her out, and for once, Emily let herself relax, promising she would enjoy the night without her usual reservations. They chose a lively downtown bar for its eclectic crowd and signature cocktails. Emily arrived with her closest friends, women she had known since college, who had seen her through the ups and downs of life. The evening started with laughter and toast, a kind of night where stories are shared and old memories resurfaced. But as the night wore on, one by one, Emily's friends began to leave. Each had their own reason. Early mornings, long drives, family obligations. By midnight, Emily was the last one left. She didn't mind. The music was still playing and the atmosphere was still buzzing. She moved to the bar, ordering one last drink before heading home. That's when she noticed him. He was standing a few feet away, casually leaning against the bar, a confident yet nonchalant air about him. He caught her glance and smiled an easy, friendly smile that seemed to light up his face. He had the kind of look that could be described as striking, with sharp features softened by brown eyes. He was well dressed, not too ostentatiously, just enough to show he cared about his appearance without being overly concerned about it. "Celebrating something?" he asked, raising his glass as he approached her. "Actually, yes," Emily replied, unable to resist the contagious warmth in his smile. "Just got promoted." "Congratulations," he said, clinking his glass to hers. "That's definitely worth celebrating." They exchanged names, his was Jake, and quickly fell into conversation. It was effortless, as if they'd known each other for years. He was charming and engaging, asking questions about her work, her life, her interests. He talked about his own life too, but always managed to steer the conversation back to her, making her feel like she was the most important person in the room. Emily found herself laughing, genuinely enjoying the conversation. She wasn't someone who easily opened up to strangers, but Jake had a way of making her feel comfortable. Time seemed to slip away, and before she knew it, they had been talking for over an hour. When she finally glanced at her watch, she realized how late it had gotten. "I should probably head home," she said, suddenly aware of how empty the bar had become. "I'll walk you to your car," Jake offered, his tone still friendly and warm as it had been all night. Emily hesitated. Her instinct was to refuse. She didn't need anyone to walk her to her car, and besides, she didn't really know this man. But he had been so kind, so easy to talk to, and the bar's parking lot was well lit and still bustling with people, so what could it hurt? "Sure," she said, smiling. They left the bar together, stepping out into the cool night air. The streets were quieter now, the earlier rush of people and cars reduced to a gentle hum in the distance. They walked side by side, chatting easily as they made their way through the parking lot. But as they reached her car, something in Jake's demeanor shifted. It was subtle, so subtle that Emily almost didn't notice it. But the warmth in Jake's eyes seemed to dim, replaced by something colder, more calculated. Before she could react, Jake grabbed her arm, pulling her close. "Jake, what?" she started, but her words were cut off as he pressed a cloth over her nose and mouth. The cloth was soaked in something sweet-smelling and chemical, and Emily's vision began to blur almost immediately. She struggled, but his grip was too strong. Within seconds, the world went black. When Emily woke up, her head was pounding. The first thing she noticed was the cold, the icy, numbing cold of metal against her skin. She was lying in the back seat of a moving vehicle, her hands bound tightly behind her back, her mouth gagged. Panic surged through her. She realized the situation she was in. The car was moving fast, the hum of the engine and the occasional jolt indicating that they were on the freeway. Emily tried to move, but her wrists were tied too tightly, and the gag in her mouth made it impossible to call for help. She could see the silhouettes of two men in the front seats, neither of whom was Jake. These men were different, rougher, more serious, and completely devoid of the charm that Jake had used to lure her. As she lay there, trying to calm her racing heart, Emily's mind went into overdrive. She was always cautious, always aware of the dangers that lurked in the world. How had she let this happen? How had she let her guard down so completely? The car drove for hours. Every now and then they would stop, but the stops were brief, just long enough for the men to switch cars, feed her, and check her restraints before continuing the journey. Emily quickly lost track of time. Days and nights blurred together in a haze of fear and disorientation. Every time she thought she had memorized a route or landmark, they would blindfold her, ensuring that she remained disoriented and helpless. They moved her from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough for her to get her bearings. She spent nights in rundown hotels, isolated cabins deep in the woods, and once in the back of a truck parked in a desolate area she couldn't identify. Each location was more remote than the last, and each time they moved her, the hope of escape seemed to slip further away. As the days stretched into what seemed like weeks, Emily clung to the thought of survival. She refused to let herself break, to give in to the despair that gnawed at her during the long, sleepless nights. She had to stay alert, had to keep thinking of ways to escape. It was the only way she could maintain any sense of control in the nightmare her life had become. Eventually, they crossed the border into Mexico. Emily could tell from the change in the environment to the shift in the language on the radio, the different landscapes, the oppressive heat that now permeated the car. They took her to a remote house on the outskirts of town, far from any signs of civilization. The house was more of a shack, its wooden walls weathered and rotten, surrounded by dense forest and miles of barren land. Here, they locked her in a small, windowless room with nothing but a thin mattress and a bucket. The door was heavy, made of reinforced wood with metal hinges. It creaked every time it was opened. The men came and went, feeding her just enough to keep her alive, but offering no explanations, no conversation. They were like ghosts, moving silently through the house, their faces expressionless. But even in the dark, suffocating place, Emily refused to give up. She spent her days listening to the men's conversation, trying to pick up on anything that might give her any clue of where she was and what their plans were. She memorized their routines, their habits, the times they came and went, and waited for a moment when one of them would slip, when one of them would make a mistake. That moment came one night, weeks after she had been taken. It was Scar, one of the men who had been with her from the beginning. The gruff, silent figure with a long, jagged scar running down his cheek. He had been drinking, and Emily could hear the slur in his voice as he argued with one of the others in the next room. The usual cold efficiency replaced by drunken frustration. Scar was supposed to lock her door when he brought her food, but tonight, in his drunken state, he left it unlocked. Emily's heart raced as she realized the opportunity she had been waiting for had finally arrived. She waited until the house was silent, until she was sure the men had either passed out or left for the night. Then, slowly, carefully, she pushed the door open. It creaked softly, but the sound was swallowed by the heavy silence of the house. She slipped out into the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The house was dark, with only the faintest light seeping in through the cracks in the walls. Emily moved quickly, her senses heightened by fear and adrenaline. She had spent weeks studying the layout of the house, and she knew the kitchen was her best bet. There, she would find something, anything, to defend herself with if she was caught. She found a knife on the counter, its blade dull but sharp enough to be useful. Holding it tightly in her trembling hand, she made her way to the front door. She knew it was the only way out. The windows were barred, and there was no back exit. The door was heavy, reinforced by metal, but it wasn't locked. Emily held her breath as she turned the handle, praying it wouldn't squeak. It didn't. The door swung open with a soft creak, and she stepped out into the cool night air. For a moment, she was overwhelmed by the sudden freedom of the open sky above her. But she didn't have time to savor it. She had to move. She had to get as far away from this house as possible before the men realized she was gone. She had no idea where she was going. All she knew was that she needed to put as much distance between herself and that house as possible. The fear of being caught again pushed her forward, deeper into the darkness of the forest. The forest was dense and disorienting, the trees all looking the same in the dim moonlight. But Emily kept moving, her senses sharp, the sounds of the night blending with her own frantic breathing. She could hear the men shouting behind her now, their voices echoing through the trees. They were searching for her, but she wouldn't let them take her back, not again, not alive. Hours passed, maybe it was only minutes. It was impossible to tell. Emily's body was screaming in pain, her muscles aching from exertion, her lungs burned with every breath. But she couldn't stop, she wouldn't stop. Finally, as dawn began to break, she saw it, a dirt road winding through the trees. It wasn't much, but it was something. She stumbled onto the road, her legs barely holding her up as she tried to decide which direction to go. She chose right, hoping it would lead her to safety. She followed the road for what felt like hours, her feet raw, bleeding from the rough terrain, her body on the verge of collapse. But she refused to give in, not yet, not when she was so close to freedom. Eventually, she came across a small village. The houses were old and worn, the streets empty at this early hour. Emily was too exhausted to be afraid. She knocked on the door of the first house she saw, praying someone would answer. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes opened the door, her expression turning to shock as she took in Emily's disheveled appearance. Emily tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She could only gesture, her hands trembling as she tried to convey the danger she was in. The woman didn't hesitate. She pulled Emily inside, guiding her to a chair in the small kitchen. She spoke quickly in Spanish, words that Emily barely understood, but the tone was clear, comforting, reassuring. The woman called for help, and within minutes, Emily heard the sounds of sirens in the distance. As she sat at the small kitchen table, surrounded by warmth and safety, Emily finally allowed herself to cry. The tears came in a rush, all the fear and pain she had kept bottled up pouring out in uncontrollable sobs. The woman held her hand, murmuring soft, comforting words, but Emily barely heard her. All she could think about was how close she had come to losing everything, how close she had been to being taken forever. When the police arrived, Emily explained what had happened. They listened, their faces grim as they took in her story. They promised to take her to the station, to contact the U.S. consulate, to do everything they could to ensure she was safe. But even as they reassured her, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over yet. Hi, thank you for listening to Across the Border, written by Roceathia Cornell. What did you think about the story? What do you think Emily's next steps will be? What was the most intense part of the story for you? Would you like to write this story with me? Well, now's your chance. My subscribers get a chance to give me their input, and we integrate their thoughts along with mine into the story. Together, we can create a submersive, interactive experience. What do you think is going to happen in part 2? Emily sure is nervous about something. Could it be her intuition, or maybe she's just overreacting and she really truly is out of danger? Well, I guess you'll have to tune into part 2 where we figure it out together. If you're enjoying this story, be sure to hit like, subscribe, share, and definitely give us a follow. We'll see you next time.